Springfield's night shift hums wrong, a wet vibration through steel and fluorescent light. Homer Simpson, who printed Doctor of Nuclear Safety from an online course and taped it to his locker because it made Marge smile, feels the reactor's rhythm fall off beat. Control rods stall. Professor Frink's emergency shunt, a polished cylinder-stamped Omega valve, do not touch, stares back like a dare. He chooses to touch it, grabs the pink frosted donut Marge tucked into his bag as if a circle can anchor him, and slams the valve as heat folds and a pressure like a freight train tears the world. The breach opens and carries him into a sky he has never seen. The seam rips above a hive world whose dawns are rationed by smog domes and schedules. Vox masts spit static. Hab chains sway over abyssal avenues. A shape burns out of the white wound and hammers a manufactorum roof. Shock rolls down spires and concentric ripples, like bells, struck in concrete. He stands, dazed, ash in his mouth, the donut scorching hot in his palm. The city below is a canyon maze of ferrocrete and prayer-stained banners. Sirens trip, valves scream. On a distant Prometheum stack, a maintenance gantry surrenders 1,000 workers to the air. He moves before he knows a word for the power. Air thickens around the falling men and women as if space itself clenches a fist. Chains hold. Bolts stop shearing. The gantry hits with a drawn-out groan instead of a shattering crack. People live. A glasses-plated Vox picture broadcasts his shape into command rooms. Contact, a woman says in a room rimmed with slate displays and brass-caged candles. Unknown asset, atmospheric. Recordings indicate human phenotype. Her name is Maelia Vor, Lord Governor of Acheron Primus. Her knuckles are white around an icon of a two-headed eagle. Another voice pinches each word like a seal on wax. The sky tears and a witch falls through, says Inquisitor Seraphine Holt of the Ordo Hereticus. Do not call it an asset. A pressure wave rolls from the Manufactorum district. A fuel line buckles. The hive's main trunk groans as a heat bloom tears through coolant arteries. He feels it before he hears it. A reactor's wrong rhythm. The shape of a failure he knows by smell and fear. The city is a plant scaled to a planet. He runs toward the sound. Girders sing overhead. He pushes his hand into air that wants to be fire. Heat wraps him and costs him. A fine trickle of blood slips from his nose. The donut glows cherry-hot in his fist and does not burn him. He reaches the artery where pipes roar like an ocean in a steel throat. He does what he did once in a small town he loved. He finds the jam. He asks the system to hold a breath. The system obeys. Bolts that should shear hold their threads. A valve spins, freeze in mid-wobble. A spray of promethium becomes a lace of beads that curves back into a gasket that was already gone. The roar drops to a growl. The lights stutter. The city does not die. 1,000,000 citizens do not fall or burn or choke in that minute. He staggers as the minute calls a price. A memory blues itself at the edges. He tries to recall the exact sound of Lisa's saxophone on a Sunday afternoon and finds static where the note should be. He blinks, swallowing dread that is not entirely his. Gunmetal ships. You can feel their hull weights in the tone of the auspex. Slide on rails, and a Vox channel opens. This is Admiral Cato Severin of Battlefleet Acheron, a clean voice says, clipped, disciplined. Unidentified human asset. Stand down and declare. You have entered a theater of war. He looks up at the camera drone. His voice is lower than it should be, and steady. I don't know where I am. I will keep doing this until people stop dying. The witch confesses to omnipotent intent. The Inquisitor says in the same room where the governor squeezes her icon. Containment protocols. The governor shakes her head once. We just watched an accident not happen, she says. I will not shoot the miracle before it gives us two. The miracle continues. A tram line above a Hab canyon snaps. Carriages pitch like beads on a string. And he stares until the bolts recollect themselves. The cars sway, then settle. Hab doors, blown inward by pressure shifts, breathe out. A child cries. A clock resumes. Far out, beyond the thin haze of Acheron Primus's exosphere, sensor petals unfold like steel flowers. A shadow with a bruise-green halo steps out of the immaterium and smiles in radio static. The translation wave shudders through void, and a dozen fever ships arrive on a tide of flies. Translation mark, the Admiral says. Warp emergence, unknown vector. Heraldry resolves to the pallet host, Nurgle aligned. They're on a straight burn for the hive. The Inquisitor closes her eyes once. Of course. She opens them and stares at the slow looping picked capture of the unknown man. It will draw them. It already has. Something in him rings like a dinner bell in the warp. The Governor sets her jaw. Then we eat before they do, she says, and pray the kitchen holds. He walks streets that were never made for feet. People reach out as he passes. A man who arrived between breaths and made the city's machinery comport. A father holds his daughter as if she is the only point of a compass that matters. A serf kisses his boots. He flinches from that and keeps moving. He experiments as he moves. Pressure fields expand when his attention is frank, and shrink when fear clinches his stomach. The donut is an anchor. When he signs a circle in air with it, just a small motion of his fist, systems respond faster. He tests a loop in time. 10 seconds. 20, 30. Beyond that, wrongness licks his mind like ashes, and his memories begin to fog faster. He pegs his limit at 30. He writes that rule inside his skull like a prayer. 3 loops per day, 30 seconds each. Dough is not a word. It is the grunt of a man pushing a machine past a limit to buy breath. The sky boils as the first pestilent warheads shear their housings and vomit onto upper spires. Filth blossoms into choked blossoms. An air defense grid built to handle piracy, and meteors coughs and commits. Void shields failing over segment Theta. An officer calls. He runs for Theta. The climb is a tunnel of stairs that drinks sweat and gives back cold air that smells of brass and old incense. The first warhead breaks open 2 levels below the Bastion's shrine. He arrives to a half-standing vault of saints and pictorial battle tapestries. A sister of battle with a burn scar, like a promise on her cheek, looks up at him, raises a bolter, and lowers it again when she feels the floor stop cracking under her feet. "Name yourself," she says, voice like corded rope. "Homer," he says. "You are a witch, Homer," she says without heat. "I am a father," he says. "Fathers fix things." She considers that and loads a new magazine with a practiced snap. Then fix this. Warhead husks split like eggs. Flies fill the vault like a song. He pushes air. He twists the vector of a falling support beam so it becomes a brace instead of a spear. He uses a loop, first of the day, to step back into a moment where a Prometheum stream can be turned by a fingernail's width. It becomes a wall instead of a fuse. The plague bloom starves for air and burns itself into a sterile stink. He wants to vomit. The loop asks for a coin. He flips a coin he cannot afford. The memory of Bart's laugh in a ballpark loses its edges. The idea of it remains. The texture frays. He breathes and keeps the second loop in reserve as if it were bred in siege time. The War Council convenes in a hex-walled hall where servo-cherubs hover and data priests murmur code like prayer. The Admiral's hololith projects black hulls with wrought halos. The Governor wears flak cloth under brocade. The Inquisitor stands as if spine is a lever she refuses to pull. The sister with the rope voice, Canoness Heria of the Order of the Valorant Candle, leans her bolter against her knee and watches him without blinking. "He saved 1,000,000 souls in an hour," the Admiral says, fingers moving through ship positions like a pianist. "I don't throw away assets like that." "He called himself a father," the Canoness says, eyes never leaving him. "That is a language I understand. But witches do not remain men when the cost comes due." "Cost," the Inquisitor says, the word careful. "Yes, we must speak of that. You taste of the warp, unknown man. You wear it like wet clothes. It will leach into this hive, into our children's mouths. He wipes his nose. Blood smears. He looks at each of them in turn. I plugged a thing into a thing because I didn't want my town to blow up, he says. I felt the wrongness here. I can't not fix it when I see it. But every fix takes something. It takes a little piece of home. What is home? The Inquisitor asks. Blue hair, he says, almost smiling, then not. A baby with a bow. A boy who gets into trouble because he's alive. A girl who is going to play something so sweet it hurts. A street that smells like wet grass. The silence that follows is clean. We keep him, the governor says. We keep him close. We bind his hands with our rules and let him pull when we say. He will work under sanction, the Inquisitor says, or he will die. It is mercy to kill him now, if he will become a door. On the hololith, the enemy lights a new candle. A barge the size of a cathedral yawns, and a filament of green emptiness unfurls from its prow. It touches an orbiting picket, and the picket's hull oxidizes into lace in a second. The ship falls apart like bread dipped in oil. Entropy, Lance, the Admiral says, voice colder. They brought toys. They brought a choir, the Canoness says quietly, listening to a wrong note inside her skull as 1,000 sick throats sing extremely human joy. The first wave falls on the hive like a rainfall of knives. He runs. The Admiral's guns do their work with cold prayer. The sisters fight like saints with hot blood. He finds places where small nudges save big lives. A munitions train that should meet an incoming barrage meets an empty track because a switch flips when it should not. A Hab block's emergency shutters close 2 seconds early and become a shield against shrapnel that would have turned a nursery into a sieve. He loops for 20 seconds to reposition a water main so it becomes a fire break. He buys lives. The Inquisitor watches men live who would have died and does not smile. Ask how many die later, because we let the witch thread fate in a pattern that suits his heart. Ask how many die now if we cut his throat. The governor replies, tired and mild. Doctrine is a lantern. We still need stairs. The second wave brings something that can answer him. It arrives inside a hush. A tallyman of quietus comes with a ledger wrapped in skins and a voice like a rusted hinge. It speaks in arithmetic. It writes in the air with the dust of dying machines. He feels his loops drag like feet in wet sand as the tallyman's hymn waits time with accounts receivable. He tries to take 30 seconds back. He gets 9. He mouths the coin for the cost and tastes bile. His nose bleeds harder. Skin under his eyes pulls taut like paper. Gorath of the pallid host descends in a rain of spalled plating and ash. It is a body loaded with iron and rot, bearing a sword that isn't a sword so much as a wound given edge. The blade drinks probability like a thirsty thing. Where it passes, bolts let go, ropes fray, and promises break. They meet on a bridge of lattice steel above a mouth of the hive. Shots peen off struts. Below, citizens run like drops of mercury. He lets Gorath come first and uses the simple truth that a large thing falls faster than a thought. He slows the blade a hair. He shifts his own weight a fraction. The blow misses his neck by the thickness of a wedding band and takes a beam that begins to groan instead of bearing. He grabs the sword arm with both hands and asks the metal of the pauldron to remember a time before rust. It obeys and tightens. Gorath rips free and laughs. The laugh is tumors blooming under happy skin. The sword touches his donut. The frosting blisters. Brown on pink. An ugly wound in a pretty thing. Pain screams up his arm like a wire with too much current. He hears a child's note in his head, the one he thought belonged to a saxophone. And it is gone. Not dim, not distant. Gone. A shape of a hole in a world shaped by circles. He shouts and staggers, and the bridge shakes. Do you smell it? Gorath purrs, voice bubbling. The sweetness, the rot inside sweetness. You are a feast of comforts. The tallyman speaks, and the loop he tries to use collapses into static. Numbers cut. Ledgers balance. He cannot steal seconds that the hymn has already sold. He retreats in good order, because retreat is sometimes heroism arranged for later. Canoness. Harriet meets him at a bulkhead that used to have a door, before a shell made a different choice for it. She covers him with bursts measured like rosary beads. He breathes. He bleeds. He counts one loop left. He keeps it in his pocket like a vow. Night comes, as an event announced in devotional tones by Hab speakers. The hive's sky changes from rust to black, and the stars are occluded by ships and wrong halos. He leans against a wall that was a fresco of saints, and is now a confusion of slashed color. He should sleep for an hour. He does not sleep because a voice begins speaking in his spine. It is his voice, but patient, educated, and empty. It has a coat with elbow patches and a lanyard that says, "Doctor, real." It smells like antiseptic and warm pastries. It shows him a room with a couch and a window that looks on green. "You did good work today," it says, setting a plate of donuts on a table. "You did the best work. They will sing of you. Sit, eat, rest in what you made." He understands the shape of this trap because it fits a shape in his gut. He wants to sit in the circle of warm and never leave. He wants to keep the city in a box where nothing breaks. "They will always be dying," the voice says, mild, persuasive. "It is not your fault. Seal them. Keep them. You have the safety field. Do it. One hive, perfectly safe forever. A Springfield, too, in a corner where it stays a certain summer, and no one grows old. Your wife will never be tired. Your boy will never disappoint you. Your baby will never leave her crib." He looks at the donut. A bite could take the taste of ash away for a second, and inside that second is a promise that contains a grave. He thinks of Marge's hair, which is a tower she builds each morning with pins and prayer and time she does not have. He thinks of the way love is not a field that keeps knives out, but a practice of bandages and held hands. "No," he says, and crushes the donut in his fist. Sugar and bread press into his palm. Power spills. The trap recoils. Something inside him tears along a pre-marked line. A memory falls away like a spent casing. He reaches for the sound of a baby's first word and touches emptiness. He bites down on a sound that would be dip and makes it shorter and uglier and pushes himself upright. A hymn rises in the hive. It is not from speakers. It is from throats. Sisters in black and ivory sing from a balcony lit by a flame as bright as a vowel. The hymn isn't a weapon. It is a direction. His spine straightens. He breathes punishing air that tastes like metal and cold incense and keeps moving. "Sanction," the Inquisitor says the next day, when maps are coffee-stained and hands shake. "Judgment. You will come to Terra. You will stand before authority, and it will decide if you are a knife we can hold by the blade or a knife we must drive into the table." The governor touches his shoulder once. "If you do not return," she says, "you will have saved us enough times to bless your name." He rides a ship that smells of Nullfield and fear. It is a black ship, holy and terrible. Its corridors patrolled by men and women whose eyes do not meet yours in case their souls lurch. Blanks walk like absence sculpted. Choirs of chained psychers hum dull prayers that never rise into music. Medicae clean blood from his nose and wrap his burned palm without asking questions about donuts. Confessor Malkiel sits with him in the chapel, where a reliquary glows faintly with someone's finger bone. The confessor's face is lines and gentleness, built over steel. "You are not a miracle," Malkiel says. "You are a lever. We must talk about fulcrums. A lever can lift a world, but if the fulcrum is rot, it falls through the floor when you need it. My fulcrum is my family," he says, staring at the candle. "And they fade when I push. Then do not push, except when the floor is the fury of hell," Malkiel says. "Do not spend the names that keep you human unless damnation makes the change." A scream of metal tears through devotion like a scythe through wheat. The ship shudders. The void opens nearby into a careful mouth. Something steps in that looks like him from a distance, if you don't know where to look. This one is tall in a white lab coat. Its eyes are rested. Its smile is soft and wrong. Its badge says, Dr. Efficiency. It speaks in charts and mercy killings. I did the math, it says to the bridge crew in a voice that greases. Seal this deck. Vent that section. Save 9 by killing one. It is elegance. It is love clean of dirt. He meets his mirror in a corridor where the lights flicker in a heartbeat rhythm. They fight without shouting. He tries to slow the mirror's hands. The mirror's hands are already in the right place. He loops for 9 seconds because the hymn of the tallyman still clings like oil. He spends 9 seconds well. He moves a serf from in front of a bulkhead that will become a guillotine of pressure. He takes a wound on his shoulder that would have taken a child in 2 seconds. He bleeds. The Astronomicon pulses like a golden drum. Even the blanks feel it in their bones. The mirror winces. Something like a crease appears in its perfect shirt, where a symbol burned through space once. We withdraw. The mirror says to something that is not here. It steps backward into a fold and smooths out of the corridor like paper between pages. Reach the throne, the confessor says, breathing hard. Before your reflections learn to use your face. Terra is a cathedral that learned to be a planet. They arrive under guns older than cities. They walk between statues whose feet are bigger than hab blocks. Custodians watch with faces like clean swords. Nulls watch with faces like closed doors. He is a drop in an ocean that is gold and dust and prayer. They bring him to a hall where sound bends and light is tired. The throne is a mountain wired to angry stars. A figure sits like a fact. There is no voice. There is a pressure that rests its hand on the back of his neck and does not break it. Images open as if they were always pressed into his skull. And someone just took the paper away. 3 paths. The first is a circle back to a small town. A house with a couch. A job with bad coffee and fluorescent lights. He goes home. The memory of why he left and what he did bleeds out like color in wash water. The lesson that suffering is bigger than one street fades. His family lives. The stars die far away without him. The cost is the knowledge of the cost, which is a kind of innocence restored with a surgical knife. The second is a road without borders. No masters. He goes where he wants, saves who he sees, breaks plans older than empires because they do not fit in his hands. The Imperium's gears grind with sand in them. Schisms tear at soft flesh. He becomes a saint to some, a curse to others, and the wars that follow his shadow burn bright. The third is a chain that is not a shackle. He kneels and is bound by law and oath and presence. He works under eyes that do not blink and hands that will cut his throat if he becomes a door. He learns to live with that. He saves what can be saved with plans that are hard to swallow and bread that is hard to earn. He becomes smaller to become stronger. He is a man who taped a fake doctorate to a locker to make his wife laugh. He is a fool who did a brave thing and paid for it in coin that hurts to touch. He chooses. The pressure nods once in his spine. The purge comes. It is not a fire. It is a washing. The corruption like a fine black dust in the corners of his mind sluices into channels he can feel sucking. It takes things on its way out. Twinges of gluttonous pleasure that were not food. Laziness that was not rest. It takes the easy lies. It threatens the soft places where his family sleeps in his mind. He locks those places behind words that are not magic, but habits. Do dishes. Listen. Show up. Try again. He stands up changed in ways no one can see, and some can smell. In his palm, the donut has become an icon. A ring with a scar, where a blade kissed it. The Aquila, the two-headed eagle, nests in that ring as if it were a halo. He wears hazard yellow under purity seals. He carries nothing that looks like a weapon, and becomes one when you ask him to be. Boundaries are spoken by mouths with titles. High lords listen as the Inquisitor reads them, and the Admiral nods at the right ones, And the canoness adds 2 that taste like steel. He may loop time thrice per day, 30 seconds each, under observation. He will not bargain or answer voices that smell of pastry and antiseptic. He will not build a safe coffin. He will not leave families to die when a plan can be bent to carry them. He will accept purges when they are surgical and argue until his voice fails when they are theater. He will leave his icon in places where his field held when the walls shook. A circle with an eagle, hazard stripes like caution and hope. Sanctioned, the Inquisitor says, voice like a judgment and a reprieve. She does not like him. She respects what he cost to survive. Servant, the canoness says, laying a hand as brief as a candle flicker on his shoulder. Not of us. With us. Inspector, the Admiral says, shaking his hand with a soldier's frankness. Of hearts, of hulls, of the thin lines where things must not break. He goes out into a galaxy that is a minefield written in blood. Rival factions mark the change like carrion birds clock a tremor. Tech priests in red send encrypted petitions to touch the Omega Valve residual singing in his cells. The Mechanicus will smile with 4 mouths if he enters their sanctum. A chapter master watches a grainy footage of a bridge not falling and says, "We will test him under fire." A rogue trader writes his name on a ledger with a curious flourish that makes it hard to erase. A man in a cowled hood on a plague ship cuts his palm and lets the blood write a shape that is a circle with teeth. Villains adjust. The tallyman inks new accounts. Gorath hones his wound blade on the thought of a father with a ring on his chest. The mirror doctor wipes a smear from his sleeve and watches a window that is not glass for a chance to show him a better, bloodless world. On Acheron Primus, sisters carve a small circle into a chapel floor where a vault didn't fall, and mothers lay flowers on it without naming why. On a ship named for a saint that failed and then did not, crewmen sit on a hazard-striped crate and drink thick tea under a fresh painted symbol. An eagle in a ring. He stands on a balcony aboard the black ship, made friendly by time and work, watching a convoy thread the void. Below him, an evacuation flotilla names itself, district by district, household by household. The ships are ugly. The ships are alive. His field leans over them like a hand, not a dome, ready to lift when bolts shiver and a plane stutters. He tries to recall the exact texture of a baby's first word, and can't. He remembers that he can't, and does not look away from that pain. He hopes there will be other first words in other rooms if he does his job properly. Alarms begin in clean descending tones. A new translation scar opens where the convoy will be in 6 minutes if no one moves. He breathes. He counts his loops. He looks at the Admiral, who looks back and tilts her chin 1.5 degrees, which means we move now. The Inquisitor watches and says nothing, because the rules are clear and hard, and his spine is straight. The canoness prays with her bolter next to her knee. He parts his hand and draws a circle in the air with a scarred ring and the machinery of a small part of a very large world. Listens to a father who refused a coffin and chose a road. The symbol glows on 1,000 hulls as if painted with light. A donut ring that is no joke anymore, holding an eagle that watches 2 ways, past and future. It is a ridiculous emblem made wholly by work. It reframes itself at galactic scale as convoys stretch and stop dying exactly as often as they should, and no more. The breach that brought him here closes in the places that matter and stays open in the places where his work lives. He walks into new fires as if walking into kitchens to make breakfasts. You only remember when someone holds your hand. He keeps moving. He does not stall. He accepts new costs. He keeps the ember of hope stubborn and low, and very, very hard to blow out. The convoy adjusts its patterns like schooling fish learning a new predator. The Admiral's hand flicks once. Ships slide, turn, and show their thicker sides to the wrong light opening where no light should be. He leans into the rail, breath held. and feels his field tug the spread just enough to keep a freighter from kissing a mine of folded space. The enemy arrives in a bouquet of rust and jubilation. Choir ships bloom like sores. A barge opens like a jaw and shows its entropy lance as if someone attached teeth to the end of inevitable. Vox carries laughter that is not mockery, but hospitality. "Welcome," it says in 1,000 cheerful throats. "Welcome to our table, Father." "Vector 7 is naked," the Admiral says. "Storm Squadron, plug the hole." "Storm Squadron here," a pilot answers, voice steady. "Plugging." He spends his first loop to move a tender 2 seconds early. It becomes a shield. A wave of unlight rakes the place where its heart would have been, and finds plating instead. He takes the cost quietly, like a man paying a toll at a gate he chose to pass. A dance step at a wedding blurs. He marks the blur and does not reach for it. On deck 4, a pressure valve chooses to fail towards safety because he looks at it with the expectation that good engineering can happen even under fire. A pipe holds. A nursery behind it keeps breathing. Canoness Haria is already there when he arrives. Bolter on sling, eyes hot with purpose. "You are sanctioned," she says, moving with him. "You are not holy." "I am tired," he says. That helps. They cross a catwalk as shells draw a glowing script in void. A crewman trips. He catches the man by the collar and sets him upright without looking away from the map the Admiral feeds him on a wrist display. The symbol on his chest, ring with eagle, glows in picked captures and becomes something a deck gang will stencil between shifts because they have hands and hope and a fraction of paint. "Entropy lance charging," a tech priest intones. Binharic chatter swarming like bees. "Unclean probability, vector matched." "Kill it," the Admiral says. Homer stares at the lance's math. He can't touch it from here. He can touch the chain of actions that feeds it. Coolant loops, capacitor banks, piling history into a narrow throat. He feeds the chain a fraction of delay. The lance fires early. It licks empty space and leaves a hole that eats its own edges. "Window," the Admiral breathes. "Boarding plan?" The Inquisitor's voice is dry as vellum. "Burn it out from the inside." Ordo stormtroopers on breach pattern Kappa. Canoness Haria leads a blade. The sanctioned servant is the wedge. He swallows. "I'm a wedge?" "You are a key we will use until it breaks," the Inquisitor says, not unkindly. "And then we will use the pieces properly." The boarding torpedo is a prayer shot like a nail. It strikes and screams and becomes a corridor by force of will and shaped charges. The enemy air tastes sweet with rot and cinnamon. Lights flutter. Flies settle on the strings of viscera looped like holiday garlands along bulkheads. Stormtroopers move like a machine that learned humility. Canoness Haria is a point of heat driving forward. He moves behind her, field low and close, holding beams that would shear under the weight of filth. He doesn't try to make the ship safe. He tries to keep it from turning into a trap before they touch the thing that matters. The Entropy Lanceheart is a cathedral built by liars. Stained glass windows depict entropy as mercy. Priests in swollen armor chant equations that murder time in neat columns. A bell forged from engine housings rings each time a capacitor meets a limit and refuses to stop. Gorath waits at the foot of the altar. He is bigger in this room because rooms like this feed things like him. The wound blade hums with mirth. "You return to my table," Gorath croons. "Will you bless the food?" Canoness Haria does not parley. She attacks. Her bolter hammers a rhythm that reminds him of a heartbeat he knows from lying on a couch, listening to someone he loves breathe. Gorath steps through the shots. The blade kisses the air, and each kiss is a betrayal somewhere else as a rivet lets go. A latch turns. A love letter burns. Homer goes low. He is a big man, but moves like someone who learned to squeeze behind machines to read gauges. He slides under a filth-laden chain and puts both hands on the lance altar. He does not touch the blade. He touches the procedure pinned beneath it. Bent copper plates stamped with ledger entries that tell the machine what it is allowed to be. He is a doctor of safety, printed and taped. It is enough. He begins a lockout-tagout ritual. He pulls a sickly cable free and tags it with an aquila in a ring drawn with a marker from his pocket. He whispers a checklist as if it were a psalm. Verify zero energy state. Test controls. Clear area. Each line is a small, straight thing in a room built to curve men into worship. The room pushes back. The tallyman is here, ledger open, pen poised. Countersign, it murmurs, delighted. You countersign. You make this clean. Oh, Father, make this clean. He spends his second loop to retime an overpressure bleed that would have cooked Haria from the inside through vents perforated with mouths. He makes the steam arrive when the mouths are shut. It scalds a procession of plague bearers into useful silence. The loop snaps back. He loses the smell of lilacs on a kitchen table in spring. He writes the loss down inside himself with a line that says, "Do not spend your third loop unless the world is falling." Gorath notices the ritual. The blade turns like a lazy swimmer toward the altar. Haria intercepts. Steel screams. The two of them leave dents in the liturgy. He keeps tagging, locking, proving. A stormtrooper dies next to him with a gurgle and a stubborn hand reaching for a button. Homer pushes the hand the last inch and makes the button honest. Final energy, he says, throat raw. Proof. The lance's hum sours. A light dies. A choir voice drops in pitch and can't find the note again. The tallyman frowns as if the math is less beautiful now. Gorath lunges. The blade will take his hands. He could hold it for a second by asking the world to care. He does not ask. A ritual ribbon, hazard tape painted with a ring, flutters from a tag he placed, and the blade cuts it. A part of the ship has been declared out of service by a man with conviction. The universe, which sometimes respects paperwork even in hell, refuses the blade entry to that specific space for a heartbeat. He uses the heartbeat to pull power. He shoves the lance's stored hate into ground through a maze of safeties he installed in the last 3 minutes. The room heaves. Capacitors whine and collapse into themselves like thoughts bent inward until they crumple. The stained glass windows show entropy surprised. Haria's strike lands in the moment the wound blade stutters. Bolter fire chews into a tumor seam in Gorath's chest. He laughs anyway and salutes with foul courtesy. "You spoil the meal," he says, not angry. He steps backward into filth that closes over him like welcome water. "Charges," the Inquisitor says in his ear, voice an unmoving blade. "Plant and leave." The Admiral will light the candle. They run. He keeps beams in positions they resent. He tells doors to open in time to admit bodies and close in time to cut off tides. He holds his third loop like a parent holds a last coin in a starving winter. They reach the breach corridor. Stormtroopers tumble into the torpedo husk. Haria covers. Homer turns to follow. Dr. Efficiency stands at the far end of the corridor, lab coat crisp, eyes amused. Its hands are clean. Its smile invites confession. "You will drop the third loop in panic," it says. "You will spend it for one person you see, and the 9 you cannot will die. Give me the loop. I will invest it. I will return 10 loops later with interest. We can make a city that stops screaming." He looks past it. A deckhand trips. A flood of pests surges from a vent. The time it takes to see both is smaller than the time it takes to think. He spends the loop to pull the deckhand into the husk by a sleeve. He will not defend the math. He will not justify with numbers. He will explain with what he did when he could choose. Dr. Efficiency smiles wider. "You are predictable," it says, almost fond. The torpedo slams shut. The clamps release. The ship rips away as the Admiral's shot finds the lance heart and makes a star where a lie was. They dock with something made by friends. The decks are ugly and clean. The Inquisitor meets them with a nod that isn't approval and isn't disdain. "You did not keep your last loop," she says. "I kept a life," he says. "That is not always the same," she replies, and walks beside him because argument is a form of respect. The Mechanicus comes with incense and curiosity. Magos Lexum Fair glides on spider limbs and speaks like static through a copper pipe. Coils dangle from its hood. Servo skulls carry trays of tools like offerings. You emanate omega harmonics, the Magos murmurs, red optics dilating. We will listen. We will graft. We will make safety reproducible. Reproducible, the Inquisitor says, tone sharpening. Or controllable. Difference is grammar, the Magos replies, not smiling because mouths are inefficient. Let us build a valve for the galaxy. Homer taps his ring with a thumb. It's warm. It broke a thing when I touched it, he says. It will keep breaking things if you force it to be a part in your machine. Everything is a part, the Magos says. Even your grief. We can thread grief. It is an energy source. The canonist steps between them with the casual weight of a tower laid flat. He is not a battery, she says. He is a man who shakes when the hymn is over. They argue later in a chapel that smells of oil and old bread. Malkiel the Confessor places a book on the pew between them. Its cover is hazard yellow with black diagonal bars, like a warning and hope. You will write, Malkiel says. Not scripture. Procedure. A manual others can hold when they cannot hold you. He writes with big hands and small care for elegance. The book grows. It says, do not loop a life to save property. It says, test before touch. It says, never make a safe coffin. It says, if a plan demands children as cost, the plan is wrong. It is not a weapon. It is worse. It is a standard. The Admiral reads it and underlines in hard pencil. We can do this. The Inquisitor reads it and adds marginalia in precise script. Exceptions for plague quarantines. Protocols for demonic incursions. The Magos reads it and copies sections into Binharik, swearing a cant that tastes like reluctant respect. Haria reads it and ties it into a rosary with wire. He trains men and women who will never touch the warp. Inspectors of hearths learn routes that will not collapse when screaming starts. They drill in habs and on decks. They memorize sight lines. They solder signs that mean this way when alarms chew meaning. The symbol, the ring with eagle, appears in chalk over doorways that will open. People begin to believe in doors that open. Belief spreads. Rival factions sniff it. A farseer watches from behind half-closed veils, sees a circle bright against futures that end in knives, and files the shape among other beautiful lies. A Tau Watercast envoy writes a note about a human who moves like a good administrator and wonders if the gospel of efficiency can be softened by love. An orc mech sees the circle and calls it a proper round thing and paints it on a buggy. The buggy does not explode as quickly. A Necron cryptech peers into a tank and sees entropy defied by forms and is offended that ritual works. A hive mind does not think about symbols, but notices paths of meat that are hard to interrupt. Gorath raids a shrine world and finds his blade slides off certain corners of certain rooms where women sing while they mop. He laughs and swings harder. The rooms hold. Dr. Efficiency infiltrates a black ship through a policy change. Quotas tighten like belts on throats. Schedules leave no space for a mother to sleep next to a crib. Dreams smell like bleach and graphs. A psyker child stops humming to a doll and goes quiet. He boards in an inspection roll with an Aquila in a ring on his chest and a clipboard in his hand. He checks the schedules. He loosens a bolt by an 8th turn, where a door would have locked on a man's hand. He cancels a perfect policy because it was designed to grind souls into powder to sprinkle on a garden of neat graves. The Inquisitor stands beside him in a ward where children draw icons with burnt matchsticks. You make schism with kindness, she says, almost approving. You will be a problem for someone I like. I'm already a problem for someone I used to be, he says, and looks up when the lights flicker. Dr. Efficiency stands at the end of the ward with a clipboard of its own and a smile that asks acceptance. It holds up a schedule that would end 3 children's nightmares. and 3 lives for pure symmetry. The blanks step into place like walls. The choir hums higher. The ward air grows thin. They do not duel with blades. They duel with procedures. He writes exceptions into systems with place names. Tavi's turn for air. Sister Lysa's break to pray with a dying man. Cargo 7 delayed to empty a nursery first. Each exception makes the schedule ugly and the world kinder. Dr. Efficiency's pen moves quicker. It finds the holes his changes open and threads death through. The Inquisitor counters with law. Harriet counters with precedent and body. Malkiel counters with a story about a bridge that didn't fall because a man took an extra minute to count bolts. The Astronomicon thrums. The ship lists a degree. The ward door creaks open and admits a draft that smells like clean rain. Dr. Efficiency frowns for the first time. Interference, it says, distaste curling its lip. Faith is unmetered. It fades with a promise written in tidy letters. Next time, the numbers will arrive earlier. The war changes shape. The pallid host learns to sing in ways that make his loops sticky. The tallyman appears at odd hours, wiping ledgers with a cloth that smells like childhood kitchens. The admiral retires from one bridge after a mass driver shell removes a third of it, and speaks from a new one with the same cadence and fewer vowels. The governor of Acheron Primus rebuilds a district with corridors wide enough for stretchers, because a manual in Hazard Yellow says corridors must be wide enough for stretchers. And she chose to be embarrassed about vanity arches when men could breathe. He loses things and learns to mark the loss without letting it define the day. A joke, a smell, the exact shade of a dress, a vacation day that will never come. He names these losses and lays them at the feet of a statue of a woman who might be a saint of patience. He keeps what he can by writing instead of holding. Terra calls again like a bell rung with a hammer wrapped in velvet. The High Lords demand reporting. The Inquisitor walks beside him up steps, worn to bowls by a billion boots. Her hair is pulled back. Her mouth is a line. She's thinking about killing him in a year or in 10, and she hopes she doesn't have to. And she will. Say the line, she says, before the doors open. I work under eyes, he says. I break plans that break children. I accept cuts when wounds are necessary. I do not build safe coffins. Good, she says. Don't forget you said it. The throne room is the same mountain that eats its own light and asks men to be smaller so the world can be larger. He kneels without drama. He does not look up. He does not need more vision. He needs permission to keep using a thing that costs him pieces of home. It comes in weight through bone. He feels approval the way a bridge might feel a load that will not make it fall. He feels warning like a hand near a stove that can't be moved. He feels love, like the memory of being held at 2 a.m. by someone who loves you, even when you are foolish. He rises and finds a small indulgence in his pocket. Paper, old and fragile. It is a recipe card written in a hand he knows, which is a miracle because he thought he had lost the way that hand curled an M. The card is for donuts. The back says, "Do not fry too fast." The card is a weapon if you look at it from the right angle. He puts it back, breathes once, and goes to work. The mandatum, circular, becomes doctrine in places where doctrine isn't embarrassed to be humane. It spreads in memos and sermons and chalk. Inspectors of hearths become a lay order attached to the sororitas by a thread of steel compassion. They wear yellow and black, and an eagle in a ring. They argue with officers and win often enough that officers begin to bring them plans before signatures are inked. A crusade forms around his work without calling itself that. It doesn't have banners. It has corridors that open and docks that don't collapse, and evacuation grids that account for people who cannot run. It has a way of walking that notices loose plates. It has a voice that says, "We can do this." Enemies learn. A warband of iron warriors tries to break a bridge he certified. They find welded plates in places no one would think to check, because someone loved that bridge. A coven of Slaneshi charmers tries to turn an inspector's pride into a blade. They hit humility that tasted like soup kitchens, and senior NCOs who won't let you skip the mop. Tyranids treat his symbol as nothing, and still take longer to eat a hab because a door closes when it must. Gorath returns where moons have tides of acid. He brings a gift. A wound blade sings with new hunger and forgets fewer rules. Homer meets him in a refinery where pipes hum with dangerous promise. The blade nicks his ring and draws a line of smoke in air. He doesn't try to be faster. He makes the room honest. He calls shut-off valves by name. He turns steam into a wall. He puts hazard tape around spaces where sacred rites of maintenance have declared no entry. Gorath's blade hates those spaces. It refuses to learn them. It carves elsewhere. They fight until both are tired. Gorath grins and bows out through a cascade of sloughed skin and abandoned laughter. "We will dine when you are hungrier," he says, and leaves a mark on a beam like a promise. Dr. Efficiency does not fight him that day. It circulates an anonymous report about a convoy he saved at the cost of 2 gunboats that might have won a battle later in a different sector. It includes charts. They are persuasive if you don't label the columns with names. The Admiral reads it and chews the end of her pencil. "We will lose men now to save cities later," she writes in the margin. "You may debate with me, but bring me faces." The Mechanicus asks for his blood again. He gives them saliva instead. The Magos drinks disappointment and leaves him with a small device that clicks when fields stress wrong. A gift, Lexham Fair says. From one engineer to another. He sits with Malkiel in a chapel lit by work lights and talks about the ethics of triage until both are hoarse. They do not resolve the math. They make a list of questions to take to the Inquisitor and the Admiral and the Governor, and they find that they have built something better than answers. A table where hard things can be set without rolling off. He dreams sometimes of a small town, where a saxophone note is missing and moves in the space where it used to live without breaking the song. He wakes with tears and counts loops and goes to a deck where someone needs a valve turned by a hand that shakes, but knows which way to go. He writes more. The manual grows teeth. It bites foolishness and spits it out. It refuses to become holy, because holiness here means excuses. It becomes habit instead. Habits change the shape of days. Days change the shape of worlds. The symbol spreads wider than he intended. It appears on a lemon rust glacis, because a tank commander lost a brother in a corridor that didn't open and swore a vow. It appears in a hive kitchen, because a cook learned a routing that gets soup to a ward before muscle fails. It appears on a pilgrim's staff, because a pilgrim walked through a fire and did not burn. Because a door closed when the book said it should. The last time he sees Terra in this season, the sky over the palace is clear as vigil glass. The Inquisitor stands with him for a minute. She does not talk about murder. She does not warn him. She says, "If you ever build a safe coffin, I will know, and I will stop you. If I ever ask for one," he says, "I want you to." She nods. They are allies, because they know where the other's blade will cut. He walks back to a ship that smells like oil and coffee and ink. The Admiral salutes without theatrics. Heria makes the sign of a circle over his chest without thinking. Malkiel squeezes his arm. The Magos sends a servo skull to hover and record. He waves it away. Alarms begin again. They always do. A choir in the warp sings a new song about fathers and rings and kitchens. The tallyman buys a better pen. Dr. Efficiency redrafts a schedule with bloodless patience. Gorath sharpens a wound on the thought of love giving ground. He goes to work. A forge world has a core that coughs. A shrine moon floods. A penal colony breaks into riot against a virus that promises joy. A trill of distress pings the board, and his hand moves without romance from target to target, making plans crisp enough to bite and soft enough to bend. He spends his loops like bread, not bullets. He holds loss like a tool, not a wound. Across 1,000 feet, the ring with the double-headed eagle glows for a breath when systems obey men who are tired and kind and hard. Children point. Officers nod. Enemies grit teeth. Saints in paintings seem to tilt their heads a degree, the way a mother might when a child finally ties his shoe alone. The galaxy does not improve. It stops dying exactly as often as it should in places where he stands, and in places where men and women with stained hands stand because they read a book and believed a door should open. The last image, for now, is small and out of the way. On a deck most will never see, a little circle chalked near a hatch, with an eagle done in clumsy lines. Someone added sprinkles. Not many, just enough to make a joke heavier than it looks. The chalk will scrub off in a week. The habit will not. The habit is a symbol reframed at a scale no map can show, held in the hands of those who push and lift and make room to breathe, and who will keep doing it until the heat goes out of all things.